Hey guys, I hope you're having a great weekend. This is your CA number 2 review. Remember, your CA is going to be on Tuesday, so be ready. Let me know if you have any other questions that I don't answer in this review. It's going to be kind of a long video, so just feel free to fast forward to the ones that you need. Alright, this is page 1, number 5. It says a set of weights includes a 4-pound barbell and 6 pairs of weight plates. Each pair of plates weighs 20 pounds. If X pairs of plates are added to the barbell, the total weight of the barbell in plates in pounds can be represented by f of x equals 20x plus 4. What is the range of the function for this situation? So the range, remember, is our output, our y value. In this case, it's f of x. In order to get the output, I've got to know the input because the input determines my output. The input are our x values. And it says x is the number of pairs of plates right here. Up at the top it says there can be 6 pairs of plates. So what you might want to do here is make a table with my inputs and my outputs. The smallest number of pairs of weight plates I can have are none. I could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 6. So those are my inputs. This right here, this represents the domain. But that's not what I'm looking for. So to use the domain to find my output, my f of x values, I'm going to plug it in where x is. So let's start where 0. I'm going to put my x values, right here where x is. So let's start with 0. 20 times 0 is 0 plus 4 gives me an output of 4. Let's try 1. 20 times 1 is 20 plus 4 is 24. Let's try 2. 20 times 2 is 40 plus 4 is 44. Let's try 3. 20 times 3 is 60 plus 4, which is 64. You might see a pattern that we're adding 20. So if you see the pattern and you just want to continue the pattern, you can just keep adding, 20 to get the next values. So what I have now, these are all of my outputs. This represents my range. So the answer that has all those outputs is answer choice B. Answer choice A would be my domains. If I wasn't paying attention, I could easily put that. Answer choice C has some of the domain, and answer choice D has some of the range. So the answer here is B. Now you can also do this on your calculator. So on your calculator, to make it work, you would go to your graph. You would go to your home page, new document, don't save, add graph. And then when the cursor comes up after f of x equals, you'll enter 20x plus 4, enter. That's going to give you the graph. After you have the graph, you can see the table by doing Control T, and then you can find all of these values in the table. Just make sure that you're looking for the outputs in the table, not the inputs. Okay, so that's how you get the table from a graph. Control T. Page 1, number 44. The graph of part of linear function g is shown on the grid. Which inequality best represents the domain? Remember the domain, these are our x values. These go from left to right on a grid. The range would be our y values, and those go from bottom to top. So first of all, if I look at my answer choices, I see x on f and g. H and j have g of x. G of x is like y. That would be what I would want to see if I was looking for the range. Range is my y. So now I've narrowed it down to f and g. So let's look at our graph. Remember, domain goes from the far left part of our graph to the far right part of our graph. So the far left part of our graph has an x value of -9, and the far right has an x value of +2. I can see both of those numbers on both of those answer choices. The big difference here are the inequality symbols. So to make sure I'm getting the right inequality symbols, I want to look at the type of dots at those numbers. At -9, I've got an open dot, which means I don't want the equal sign. I want to have just a less than sign. So I want this one on answer choice F. On the other side of the graph on number 2, I've got a closed dot right here. Closed dot means I want a less than with the equal sign underneath, which is also what I have here next to the 2 on answer choice F. So answer choice F is a better answer. Answer choice G is close to F. It would be the best wrong answer, but there's a slight difference there, so make sure you're paying attention to those subtleties. Page 2, number 23. What is the equation in slope-intercept form of the line that passes through points -447 and 2, -16? So whenever I've got 2 points and I need to write an equation, the very first thing I need to do is to find the slope. So remember, we've done this before. You're going to subtract your y's in the top, subtract your x's in the bottom. Our y values, we've got 47 and -16. We could either do 47 minus -16 or -16 minus 47. Choose one of those ways. However you choose, you want to be consistent with the order that you subtracted when you get to the x's in the denominator. So I'm going to choose 47 minus -16. So in the bottom, I need to do -4 minus 2. So now I'm going to kind of clean this up a little bit. I know that 47 minus -16 minus a negative is the same as a plus, so that's like 47 plus 16 over -4 minus 2. 47 plus 16 is 63. -4 minus 2 is -6, and that simplifies to -21 halves. So this is the slope that I want to use. Now I have a choice. I can choose either of my 2 points in point slope form. Point slope form, remember, is this. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. And what I'll be doing, I'll be replacing the m with the slope that I just found, and the x1 and the y1 with the x and y values of either of the 2 points. I think I'm going to choose this point over here. So I'm going to use my slope of -21 halves and my x and y values of 2 and -16. So let's go ahead and plug in what we know. Y minus my y1 is going to be -16 equals, my m is -21 over 2, parentheses, x minus, my x value is 2. Okay, now I just want to clean it up a little bit. On the left, the minus negative is the same as plus, so I have y plus 16 equals. On the right, I need to distribute that -21 halves. -21 halves times x is -21 halves x. -21 halves times -2, I could put the -2 over 1 and I can multiply my numerators. First of all, a negative times a negative is going to give me a positive. 21 times 2, I'm going to go up here, is 42. 2 times 1 for my denominator is 2, and 42 divided by 2 simplifies to just 21. Remember also that we said whenever I multiply a fraction times its denominator, I'm going to get the numerator. Remember we said that? So just kind of keep that in mind. All right, let's keep going. Remember, I'm trying to get it in slope-intercept form, so I need to make sure that that y is by itself. So all I have to do now is subtract 16 from both sides so that I just have y on the left, and I'll have y equals -21 halves x. 21 minus 16 is +5. So the equation that looks like this is letter C. After I found my slope, I could have eliminated B and D because they had the reciprocal of my slope. So that would have been a good idea to kind of help narrow down my answer. Anytime you can eliminate an answer, that's going to increase your chances of getting it correct. Now, there are 2 ways that you could do this also in the calculator, and anytime you can use the calculator on a test, go ahead and do it. It's going to save you a lot of time. So in the calculator, if you line up these points, negative 4, 47, and 2, negative 16, basically you can enter this as a list in your lists and spreadsheets like we did at the very beginning of the year. So you would go, new document, don't save, add lists and spreadsheets. You would enter your X's in one column, make sure to label the column X. Enter your Y's in the next column, make sure to label your column Y. And then you would press menu 413. That's going to give you the R value, which we don't need, but it's going to give you the M and the B as well. So if our equation in slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, all I have to do is replace the m, replace the b, and then I can get my answer of C. In your calculator, though, the slope is probably not going to be given to you as a fraction, so you'll probably have to convert that to a decimal and then see which one matches. So that's one way you can do it in the calculator. Another way you can do it in the calculator is you could go to your graph, so you could go to new document, don't save, add graph, and then when the cursor comes up, you could type in each of these, right? And you would want to do this one at a time. So you would type it in, enter, it would graph it, and then remember, if you press Control T, that'll bring up the table, and then all you have to do is search through your table for these 2 points. Whichever graph has both points, then that's your line. So those are 2 ways you can do it in the calculator. Page 2, number 46. Which equation in standard form has a graph that passes through the point negative 4, 2, and has a slope of 9/2? Whenever you're given the slope and a point, you guessed it, you're going to use point slope form. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Remember, you're going to replace your y1 and your x1 from the point that they give you. Sorry, I'm not able to. And then you're also going to replace the m with the slope that they give you. So let's go ahead and do that. Y minus, my y value is 2. My m is 9/2. Parentheses x minus, my x value is negative 4. Okay, so right now we're in point slope form. We got to go to standard form. So this is one of the last things we learn. Whenever we're trying to go from point slope to standard, we've got to go from point slope to slope intercept, and then from there we'll go slope intercept to standard. So it's quite a little bit of a process, but we can totally do this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean up our graph. I see a minus negative, so I'm going to rewrite it as a plus. Y minus 2 equals 9/2 times parentheses x plus 4. Okay, now I'm going to distribute my slope. Draw my line. So I've got y minus 2 on the left equals 9/2 times x is 9/2 x. 9/2 times 4, put the 4 over 1. For my numerators, 9 times 4 is 36. For my denominators, 2 times 1 is 2. 36 divided by 2 is going to be 18. Okay? All right. So now we're ready to go. We're almost to slope-intercept form. We just got to move that minus 2 to the right, so I just have y on the left. We're going to do that by adding 2 to both sides. Y equals 9/2 x plus 18 plus 2 is 20. So now we're in slope-intercept form. Now we're going to go to standard form. So there's 2 things that we're going to do. The very first thing we're going to do is we're going to multiply everything by the denominator if we've got a fraction, which we do. So our denominator is 2. We're going to multiply the entire equation by 2 just to get rid of our fractions. And you have to multiply every single term by 2. Okay, 2 times y is 2y. 2 times 9/2 x, remember when you multiply a fraction times its denominator, you're going to get the numerator. So we're going to get the numerator of 9 followed by the x. And then 2 times 20 is 40. Okay, remember, we're trying to make it look like these guys over here in standard form. So we're going to move our x term to the left by either adding or subtracting. So because 9x is positive, we're going to subtract 9x from both sides. 2y and minus 9x are not like terms, we're going to list the x term first, followed by the 2y, and that equals 40. All right, remember the last thing you want to check at the coefficient of x. It's got to be positive. In this case, it's negative, so we're going to multiply the entire equation by a -1, and all that's going to do is just change the sign of every term. So the negative 9x will become positive 9x. The positive 2y will become negative 2y, and the positive 40 will become negative 40. So this is now in standard form. And the answer that matches that is letter H. That's it. Page 2, number 50 says the table represents some points on the graph of a linear function. Which equation represents the same relationship? If you look in the answer choices, they're all in point-slope form, so we want to kind of remember that. Remember, point-slope form is y minus y1 equals m times parentheses x minus x1. Let's take a look at our table first. The first thing we'll need to do is figure out our slope. Because it's a linear function, that means I can choose any 2 points from my table and I should get the same slope. So it doesn't matter which ones I choose. I think I'll just choose maybe the first 2. So I'm looking for the change in y on the right and the change of x on the left. On the right, to go from negative 268 to negative 196, I'm adding 72, going towards the positive direction. And on the left, to go from negative 20 to negative 14, I'm adding 6. So to figure out the slope, remember the slope is the change in y over the change in x. The change in y is 72. The change in x was 6. And 72 divided by 6 is 12. So I'm looking in my equations for the ones that have a slope of 12. Remember, slope is right here. And I see this one has 1/12. This one has 1/12. I see 12. I see 12. So I can eliminate f and g. That's great. Now I'm going to look and look a little bit further. So what they have now I got to look at the x1 and the y1. And it looks like on H and J that they both use, they have 20 and 268. That point up here is the very first point. Now on both of these answer choices, they both have a plus, which means for my equation, which has a minus, we would be subtracting a negative to get the plus. So they both look good there. I just need to make sure my x's and y's are in the right spot. My x value should be the negative 20, and that needs to be right here in the parentheses. So that's going to be H. J, it looks like they use the y value there. So I don't want to pick J. And then if I look at H just to make sure that the y value is in the right spot, the negative 268 is right there. So H is going to be my answer. J would be my best wrong answer. Now we're on page 3, number 35. An organization has a monthly budget of X dollars. Each month, $2,070 is spent on salaries. 1/4 of the remaining budget is spent on monthly activities. Which function can be used to find the amount in dollars spent on monthly activities? So it looks like each month they start off with a budget of X dollars. That's how much money that they have to spend that month. They spend $2,070 on salaries, so they're taking that much money away from their budget, subtracting it out. Of the remaining budget, 1/4 of it is going to be spent on monthly activities. So to get the amount of money for monthly activities, we're basically going to figure out what 1/4 of this is. So we're going to divide it by 4. The answer choice that looks like that is D. That's it. That's all you got to do there. Page 3, number 22. Which equation can be represented by the graph shown below? If you look at the answer choices, they're not in any form that we know. They're not in standard, slope-intercept, or point slope. They look similar to standard form, but in the way that they look, there's no way I can tell anything about my graph. So I'm going to have to rearrange my equations, and unfortunately, I'll probably have to do each one at a time. So it is going to require a lot of work. But let's go ahead and look at our graph and see what exactly we're going to be looking for. So if I want to figure out the slope, this graph's a little bit tougher to find points, and I know the graph is really hard to see, but there's a point here, our y-intercept. Our x-intercept is kind of between 5 and 6, so I don't want to use that, but I do kind of see a point. It's very hard to see right here at, hold on, not there. Hold on just a second. Right there at 8, -1. So if I make my triangle, I've got a rise of 3 and I've got a run of 8. And my graph's going down from left to right, so I'm going to be looking for the equation that gives me a slope of negative rise of 3 over run of 8. This is the slope I'll be looking for. So what we're going to do is we're going to put each of these equations into slope-intercept form. And we can also look for a y-intercept, it looks like, of +2 right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with f. We've got -3x plus 8y plus 16 equals 0. Remember, if I want it to look like y equals mx plus b, so I can see my slope and see my y-intercept, I've got to get y by itself on the left. I've got everything on the left, so I need to basically move over the 16, move over the -3x, and then we'll get rid of the 8 at the very end. So let's go ahead and do that. We can start by moving our constant over, -16 on both sides. So we've got -3x plus 8y equals 0 minus 16 is -16. Now we're going to move our x term over by doing the opposite. It's negative, so we're going to add 3x to both sides. So I've got 8y on the left equals -16 and 3x aren't like terms. I'm going to put my x term first, followed by my constant. Last thing we want to do is divide everything by the 8 so we can get y by itself. Y equals, I can see my slope right here. The problem is it's positive and I need a negative slope. So this is going to give me +3/8, and then -16 divided by 8 is going to give me a -2. So this gives me a negative y-intercept, so that's wrong. It gives me a positive slope, which I need a negative, so that's wrong. So f is out. Alright, so let's try the same thing with g. G is 3x minus 8y plus 16 equals 0. So I'm going to move my constant to the other side by subtracting. So we get 3x minus 8y equals 0 minus 16 is -16. Again, I'm going to move my x term to the left. This time I'm going to subtract it because it's positive. I end up with -8y. Be careful there. Bring down the negative. Not like terms on the right, so I'm going to put the x term first, -3x, followed by the -16. And then I'm going to divide everything by a -8 to get the y by itself. So y equals my slope, -3 over -8. I know if I have a negative in the bottom and the top, that's really positive. And then -16 divided by -8 is +2. My y-intercept is good, but my slope is still positive, so that's not good, so I'm going to eliminate g. Alright, let's try h. -3x minus 8y minus 16 equals 0. Move my constant over by adding it this time because it's negative to both sides. -3x minus 8y equals 0 plus 16, which is 16. Now I'm going to move my constant over since it's negative. Sorry, not my constant, my x term. Since it's negative, I'm going to add 3x to both sides. So I end up with -8y equals, I'm going to put my x term first, followed by my constant, and then I'm going to divide everything by -8. This process is very similar. We just did it a couple times. Y equals, now my slope, I've got a positive and a negative in my top and bottom, which means my slope is finally negative like it's supposed to be, but my y-intercept, 16 divided by -8, is going to be -2. So my y-intercept is wrong, but my slope is good. but they're not both right, so we're going to get rid of h. It's got to be j, but let's just double check. All right, so j is 3x plus 8y minus 16 equals 0. Let's move our constant of negative 16 over by adding it to both sides. So we get 3x plus 8y equals 16. Move my x term over by subtracting it from both sides, minus 3x. 8y equals negative 3x plus 16. Last step, divide everything by 8, so y is by itself. So y equals, I've got a slope now of negative 3/8, which is good. Oops. And then 16 divided by 8 is positive 2, which is also good. So my y-intercept is right, and my slope is right. Therefore, okay, I think I might have not recorded that part, but here is how you would move j around up here. When you move it around, we get the right y-intercept and the right slope, so we're good to go. Now this problem involved quite a bit of work. If you have a problem like this on your CA or your STAR test or your benchmark, take your time. Remember, you can catch up time with other problems. So some problems are going to take a lot more time than others. Don't waste your time, though, on the ones that don't require a lot of work. All right, now we're on page 4, number 27 at the top. The value of y is directly proportional to the value of x. If you see the word proportional, I want you to think proportion, which I know y'all spend a lot of time with in junior high. It says if y is 35 and x is 140, what's the value of y when x is 70? So there's a couple different ways you could set it up, but make sure that your proportion makes sense. I'm going to start off with the y equals 35 and the x equals 140, and I'm just going to make a fraction. So I decided to put my y on top and my x on bottom. So I need to be consistent on the other side too. On the other side, I'm trying to find my y, so I can just leave it as a variable, and then I know my x is 70, so that will go on the bottom. Now that I've got a good proportion, now I'm going to solve. So just like in junior high, you're going to cross multiply. Some of y'all called this butterfly. 140 times y is 140y. And then we also want to do 35 times 70. This and this, these are called cross products, and cross products are always equal. So what we want to do now is we want to solve this equation. On the right, 35 times 70 is 2,450. And then I have 140y on the left. To get y by itself, I'm going to divide by 140. So y equals 17.5. So this would be one of those bubble grid questions. Remember, you'll never bubble in a fraction. You'll never bubble in an ordered pair or an equation. They're usually just going to be like one number answers. So you would just type in, or not type in, but bubble in 17.5. Remember, the bubble grid questions are usually some of the easier questions, so don't skip them because you're not sure. This is the second problem on page 4. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a problem number. It says the value of y varies directly with x. Which function represents the relationship between x and y if y is 20/3 and x is 30? So let's talk about varies directly. This is the same kind of as the last question that says directly proportional. So this line is going to go through the origin. Okay, it's going to have a point at the origin, and it's going to be something kind of like that. The x equals 30 and the y equals 20/3. This is just a point somewhere on the graph. Okay, somewhere up here. So what we really need to do, if you look at your answer choices, those are all in slope-intercept form. They have no b because b is the y-intercept, which is the origin, so it's plus 0. So basically, if we can find the slope, then we know what equation it is. The other point we're going to use for our slope is the origin, 0, 0. So we'll just use those 2 points. Okay, so we've got an x and a y, x and y. So remember slope, we want to subtract our x's. We've got 20/3 minus 0. And then the bottom we want to sorry, I misspoke. We want to subtract our y's in the numerator, our x's in the denominator. So in the denominator, we'll do 30 minus 0. Sorry about that. 20/3 minus 0 is just 20/3. So I've got 20/3 in the top, and then in the bottom, I've got, I'm goofing up, guys, I'm sorry. In the bottom, it should have been 30 minus 0. That's my x value. So sorry, guys. 30 minus 0 is 30 for the denominator. So this is my slope. It looks a little weird because I've got a fraction within a fraction, but if you type all this into your calculator, it will simplify it for you to 2/9. So that is the slope that we're looking for on our equation, and I can see that on G. Y equals mx plus b. Remember, our b is 0. So G is our answer. Number 25 on page 4, the graph of line G is shown below. Which equation describes a line parallel to line G that has a y-intercept of 0, -1? Okay, so first of all, to make a parallel line, we're looking for a line that has the same slope. That's first and foremost. So we need to look at the slope of the line in our graph, and I've already have 2 points kind of located. So let's go ahead and make our triangle. Our slope for our rise, we're going from a y value of 6 to a y value of 2. That's going to be a rise of 4. For our x values, we're going from -4 to +2. That's going to be a run of 6. This is a negative slope because it's going down from left to right. So our slope is going to be negative rise of 4 over run of 6. And that simplifies. Nope, I messed up again. Sorry guys, I'm goofing up everywhere. Okay, let me backtrack. I messed up. So, our run, I'm sorry, we're going from -4 to +4. I misread. That's going to be a run of 8. I'm so sorry. So our slope is -4 over 8, which simplifies to -1/2. We're looking for a slope of -1/2. All of my answer choices are in slope-intercept form. So y equals mx plus b. C is the only one that has the same slope of -1/2. So without even having to worry about this other point, I've already narrowed down my answer, so I can choose C with confidence. All right, now we're on page 5 at the top, number 36. What is the equation of the line that passes through the point -2, 7 and has a slope of 0? So I need you to remember a slope of 0 is going to be a horizontal line. The equation for a horizontal line is always y equals whatever y value is given. It's going to go through the y-axis at that number. Right? So if I was making my graph, if this is my x and this is my y, it would be something like this. Slope is 0. Whatever number it goes through the y-axis at, that's its equation. The y value that we have is 7. So our equation is just going to be y equals 7. Make sure that you don't accidentally get confused and pick x equals 7. Sometimes when we think of a horizontal line, we think of the x-axis, which reminds us of x, but it's actually the opposite. Also remember, on another note, if we've got a slope that's undefined or no slope, it's going to be a vertical line, and the equation for that line is always going to be x equals the x value. So if on the coordinate grid, it would look something like that. So whatever x value this is, that would be its equation. Page 5, number 16, what is the slope of the line represented by 5x minus 12y equals 24? this form is in standard form. Unfortunately, in this form, I cannot see my slope. So what we're probably going to have to do is rearrange it into slope-intercept form. So remember, there's always two steps to do that. The first, we want to move our x term to the right. 5x is positive, so we're going to subtract 5x from both sides. We're going to get negative 12y equals 24 and negative 5x aren't like terms, so we're going to list our x term first, followed by our constant. The last thing we got to do is divide by the coefficient of y, which is negative 12. So we're going to divide every single term by negative 12. So we're going to get y equals, for my slope, I've got a negative over a negative, which is a positive. So our slope is going to be positive 5/12 x plus 24 divided by negative 2 is going to be a negative 2. That would be my y-intercept. But I'm really just concerned right here with the slope, since that's what it asks, so our answer is J. Number 8 on page 5 at the bottom. The slope of the line that passes through the points negative 6, W, and negative 10, 4 is 1/8. What is the value of W? So this is where I'm kind of working backwards for my slope of 1/8 to figure out what W needs to be. So I'm going to set up my slope as if I knew what W was, just like I normally would. So I'm going to subtract my y's in the top, subtract my x's in the bottom, and I know that this slope that I'm figuring out needs to equal 1/8 because that's what it says. So my two y values are W and 4, so I can do 4 minus W or W minus 4. I think I'm going to do W minus 4. So in the denominator, I need to subtract my x's. That's negative 6 minus negative 10. Now what we have is we have a proportion, and we've got one variable, so we're going to try to solve this. So the first thing we want to do is kind of simplify. If I look at my denominator, I see that minus and negative. I know that's the same as plus. So I'm just going to rewrite my equation. 1/8 equals W minus 4 over negative 6 plus 10, and negative 6 plus 10 is 4, so I'm going to rewrite it again. 1/8 equals W minus 4 over 4. Now I've got a proportion that I can solve. So this is where we cross multiply. We do what y'all call as butterfly. Now when I do the 8 times the W minus 4, I'm multiplying 8 by the whole thing of W minus 4, so I've got to put it in parentheses. I'm going to come up here and rewrite it. So I've got 8 times W minus 4, that's one cross product. My other cross product is 1 times 4, and I know that cross products are equal. So now I've got this equation that I can solve. First thing I'm going to do is distribute that 8 to the W and the minus 4. 8 times W is 8W. 8 times negative 4 is negative 32. On the right, we've got 1 times 4, which is 4. To get W by itself, I'm first going to move my constant to the other side, that minus 32. I'm going to add it to both sides. So I've got 8W equals 4 plus 32 is 36. The last thing I want to do is divide both sides by 8. So W equals 36 over 8. And that simplifies to 9 over 2, 9 halves. So this is the missing value of W. If I try to do the slope again with 9 halves, I should get that slope of 1/8. All right, now we're on page 6, number 26 at the top. The graph models the linear relationship between the temperature of Earth's atmosphere and the altitude above sea level. Which of these best describes the rate of change of the temperature with respect to altitude? Rate of change, remember, is just another way to say slope with units. Okay, so if I look at my answer choices, all my units are the same, degrees Celsius per kilometer. All my slopes are negative, so I know I've got a negative slope. I could see that from my graph, so I really just got to pick the right number as my slope. So we're going to have to find the slope from this graph. Remember, you need 2 points. Now, this graph is a little tricky because I don't really see 2 points that look very good. So I'm going to do my very best, see what slope I get, and then I'm just going to pick the answer choice that's closest. So we did this with some of the classes in class. That looked like a pretty good point. I think this point is pretty good too, right here. So let's try to use these points to make our triangle. Our rise is 2 units, but it looks like over at the left on the y-axis, each unit represents 10 degrees. So 10, 20, we've got a rise of 20. For my run, my x values look like they're counting by ones, and I've got 3 units, so it'll just be 3. So my slope is negative, like we said. Our rise is 20, our run is 3. So now I just got to put that in my calculator, and I get about negative 6.7. So I'm looking for the answer choice that's going to be closest to this, and that's going to be answer choice F. If you flipped your X and your Y, or your rise and your run, it would be really easy to get another answer choice, and I guarantee they probably have that answer choice listed. So be really careful not to get tricked up. All right, still on page 6 at the bottom, number 52, the function y equals 3.75 plus 1.5 times parentheses x minus 1 can be used to determine the cost in dollars for a taxi ride of x miles. What is the rate of change of the cost in dollars with respect to the number of miles? So remember, rate of change is the slope. I've got an equation. However, this form of the equation that I have isn't a form that I'm familiar with. I know that I can see the slope in slope-intercept form, which is y equals mx plus b. So if I can get my equation to look like this, then I can just pick out the slope. So let's see if we can't figure out how to rearrange that. So I'm noticing for my equation that I already have y by itself on the left. Looks like I just need to kind of clean up the right so that I don't have parentheses and that the x terms before the y-intercept, the constant. So let's see what we can do here. On the right, to get rid of parentheses, I can distribute that 1.5. So we've got 3.75 plus 1.5 times x is 1.5x, and 1.5 times negative 1 is negative 1.5. Now all I've got to do is combine my like terms and put my x term first. So I want to put that 1.5x first. Then I'm going to combine my 2 constants. That'll end up being my y-intercept. 3.75 minus 1.5 is positive 2.25. I'm not really concerned with that though, because remember, I just want the slope. The slope right here is 1.5, or with units, $1.50 per mile. Page 7 at the top, number 12. A lifeguard earns $320 per week for working 40 hours, plus $12 per hour worked over 40 hours. A lifeguard can work a maximum of 60 hours per week. Which graph best represents the lifeguard's weekly earnings in dollars for working H hours over 40? So this one is a little bit tricky, but we're going to figure it out. Let's look at the first sentence again. So a lifeguard earns $320 for working 40 hours, plus they earn $12 per hour for every hour worked over 40 hours. So this is how much they earn for 40 hours. This is how much they earn for working any hours over 40 hours. They earn $12 for each additional hour. Okay, so if I put a y here, then I kind of have my equation. So it looks like my slope is 12. My y-intercept is 320. So that's kind of what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for a y-intercept of 320. That looks like F and G. H's y-intercept and J's y-intercept is at 0, so I'm going to eliminate those two. So another big difference between F and G, the slopes look a little bit different, but the graphs also stop. They both stop at 20 hours, but they stop at different dollar amounts. So I'm going to have to figure out, well, what does that mean? So what I really need to figure out is how much money is earned at at 20 hours over 40 hours. So that would be when my H is 20 hours. So I'm going to take my equation. I've got 320 plus 12. This time we're going to do 20 because that's the X value right here at both of those points. I need to figure out, well, what's the Y value going to be? Okay, so I'm just going to evaluate this. 320 plus 12 times 20 is 240. And then if I add 320 and 240, I get $560. That should be the output when my input is 20 hours over the 40. So if I look at both of these, F is a little bit below 500 and G is somewhere between 500 and 600, probably pretty close to 560, so I'm going to pick G as my answer. Page 7, number 40 at the bottom, which value of X makes the equation true? So there's two ways you could do this. You could solve it, which we'll do together, but you could also take each answer choice one at a time, plug them in where X is. So for example, if you took F as your answer choice with the 64, you would put 64 where X is. You would type this whole thing into your calculator, but instead of X, use 64, enter. It'll tell you true or false. If it's true, that's your answer. If it's false, it's not your answer. Okay, but what we're going to do, we're going to also do it by hand just because we need to practice that. So the first thing we're going to do, because we have parentheses, is we're going to distribute to get rid of parentheses. So 0.75 times X is 0.75X. 0.75 times 20 is 15. On the right, I've got 2 plus 0.5 times X is 0.5X, and 0.5 times negative 2 is negative 1. Now we need to combine some like terms here. On the left, we've got no like terms, so I'm just going to rewrite those. On the right, I can combine the 2 and the minus 1. That makes 1. And then plus the 0.5x. Now I need to decide which side I want my x's on. I think I'll move them to the left, so I need to move that 0.5x to the left by subtracting 0.5x from both sides. 0.75x minus 0.5x is 0.25x plus 15 equals just 1 on the right. My x's are now on the left. I'm going to move my constants to the right. That 15 I'm going to move over by subtracting it from both sides. So I've got 0.25x. 1 minus 15 is negative 14. And then the last thing I'm going to do is get rid of my coefficient of x by dividing both sides by 0.25. So I get x equals negative 14 divided by 0.25 is negative 56. So my answer is J. All right, page 8 at the top, 32. The graph of a function is shown on the grid. Which ordered pair best represents the location of the y-intercept? The y-intercept is where my graph crosses the y-axis. My graph crosses it right here at that point at negative 2. Now the way I want to write it is I want to put my x value before my y value. For the y-intercept, that's where x is 0. Remember, for x-intercept, that's where y equals 0. So for x-intercept, it would be the value of x, comma 0. For y-intercept, it's 0, comma, the value of y. In this case, it's negative 2. Make sure that your 0 is in the right spot. The answer is G, but J is also very tempting for some students, so don't get it mixed up. Also, if you look at F and H, one of those is your x-intercept, so pay really close attention to which one it's asking for. These questions like this should be very easy to get correct, so just pay close attention that you're not making a silly mistake. Okay, bottom of the page 8, number 41. What is the 0 of r of x equals 8/3 x minus 16? 0, remember, is another way to say x-intercept. Okay, this is a newer term. Remember, x-intercept is where y equals 0. In this equation, r of x, that's my function notation, and that's kind of the same as my y. So that's where I want to put 0. So I'm going to rewrite my equation, putting 0 there equals 8/3 x minus 16. Now all I have to do is solve for solve for x to get my x-intercept or my 0. To get x by itself, I got to get rid of that minus 16, and then the 8/3 we'll get rid of at the end. To get rid of the minus 16, we're going to add 16 to both sides. So I get 16 on the left equals 8/3 x on the right. Now what I've got to do is get rid of that fraction coefficient. Anytime you have a fraction coefficient, the way to get rid of it is you're going to flip it and then multiply both sides by that reciprocal. If I flip 8/3, I get 3/8. So let's see if we can remember how to do this. On the right, 8/3 times 3/8 just equals 1, so I've got 1x on the right, or just x. On the left, I got to put 16 over 1, multiply my numerators. 3 times 16 is 48, 8 times 1 is 8, and 48 divided by 8 is 6. So for my 0, where y is 0, I get an x value of 6. So my answer is C. To write this as an ordered pair, remember you'd put your x value first, followed by your y value of 0 next. Now, another way you could do this is you could actually go to your graph. So you would go home page on your calculator, new document, don't save, add graph, and then when the f of x equals comes up, you'll enter this because it's in slope-intercept form, and you'll press enter to see the graph. But then remember, if you press Control T, that'll pull up the table, and what you'll do is you'll scroll through your table to where your y value equals 0. And when you find that, remember you can scroll up or down, it should say that x equals 6, so that is your 0. When the reason why we call 0 another name for x-intercept is because that's where the value of the function equals 0. All right, last page, page 9, number 11 at the top. Linear function f of x equals x is graphed on a coordinate plane. The graph of a new line is formed by changing the slope of the original line to 2/3 and then the y-intercept to 4. Which statement about the relationship between these two graphs is true? So remember, f of x equals x is just like y equals x. That is our parent function. And if you remember how we talked about that in class, it goes through the origin and it has a slope of 1 or 1 over 1. So remember, if this is in slope-intercept form, the slope is right here in front of the x. It's 1 over 1. And then the y-intercept is 0. Okay? So what they're saying is, well, what if we change our graph from that to having a slope of 2/3 and a y-intercept of b? So that would give us y equals 2/3 x plus 4 for my b. So what you can do here is you can kind of think about, well, how does the slope change? How does the y-intercept change? But you can also go to your graph. So in your calculator, go to home page, new documents, don't save, add graph. And then when the f of x equals cursor comes up, you're going to type x, enter, press tab so it comes back up, and then you'll type 2/3 x plus 4, enter. And what you're going to see is you'll see both equations and you can see how the graphs have changed. What's going to happen, my slope, instead of going up 1 over 1, I'm going to go up 2 over 3, and my y-intercept is going to go up to 4. So my graph is going to look more like this, and you can kind of verify it in your calculator. This is the second graph. The blue line is my parent function. So what happened, it looks like my graph went up 4 units, right? And then the slope became a little less steep. If I was walking up the blue, like if it was a hill and I was walking up the yellow would be a little easier to walk on because it's not as steep. It's less steep. So I'm looking for the answer choice that has less steep and up. Those are the two things I want to look for in my answer choices. B says less steep and up. So that's probably the one I'm going to pick. But just always double check your other answers. The other answers say steeper and down, so A's out. Steeper, up is okay for C, but the steeper's not right. And then for D, I've got less steep, which is good, but then I also have down at the bottom, so D is out. All right, page 9, number 45. A student graphed f of x equals x and g of x equals f of x plus 3 on the same coordinate grid. Which statement describes how the graphs of f and g are related? So by now we should kind of know that f of x equals x. That's our parent function. It goes through the origin, has a slope of 1. Now this other equation looks a little weird. It says f of x plus 3. So this part basically just means the same as this guy. So it's basically this guy plus 3. The plus 3 is like my y-intercept. My y-intercept is going from a plus 0 to a plus 3. So if I was to go to my graph and actually graph it in my calculator, I would go to my graph and enter x as one graph. For f of x plus 3, I could just enter x plus 3 because f of x is the same as x. And what I would get another line that just looks like it's moved up 3 units. It's the only thing that would change. So the answer choice that looks like that is A. The graph of f is shifted 3 units up to create the graph of g. The steepness of each graph hasn't changed. They actually are parallel because they have the same slope. Okay, page 9, number 11. This is actually the last problem because number 40 on that page is a repeat from another page, so we're not going to do that one twice. So yay! This one's a lot like number 40 though. You can do this 2 ways. It says what's the solution? Basically which answer choice makes it true. You could try each answer choice, replace x with that number that you're trying, type the whole thing into your calculator, and then whatever you get, it'll say true or false. If it's true, that's your answer. If it says false, you'll just try the next answer choice. But we can also solve this by hand because we've got the skills. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing you want to do is always get rid of your parentheses. So we're going to distribute. In front of the first set of parentheses, we have a negative 3. So make sure that you distribute the negative with the 3. And then on the right, we've just got a 3 that we're distributing. So on the left, we've got 8x. Negative 3 times 2x is negative 6x. Negative 3 times negative 4 is positive 12. On the right, we've got 3 times x, which is 3x, and 3 times negative 6, which is negative 18. Now we want to clean up each side and combine any like terms we have. 8x and minus 6x will combine to make 2x. Now we want to move all of our variable terms to the same side. I think I'm going to move my variable terms to the right. So I'm going to move that 2x to the right by subtracting 2x from both sides. So we get 12 equals 3x minus 2x is 1x, or just x, minus 18. Now we're going to move our constants to the other side, to the left. So the minus 18, I'm going to add to both sides. 12 plus 18 is 30 equals x. There is my answer. Alright guys, if there's any of these problems that you still aren't quite understanding or any concepts that we've learned that you need help with, come find me during advisory. Be really ready on Tuesday. Do your best. Trust yourself. You guys know how to do all this. Just take your time and have a great rest of your weekend.